cause additional litigation costs. So that's something we very much want to avoid. So in partnership with OSBM and with their approval, NCGA added $2.5 million of funding to the project from the Ferry Capital Fund from Division 2, which is the division that the vessel is going to operate in. It was granted authority under the statutes NCGS 13682 and NCGS 143C-6-4. And important to note that all the new funding was set to priority 003 to ensure that it's going to be the last used. And if it's not used, it will go back to the fund. Next is our next new vessel is going to be motor vessel Silver Lake replacement. This vessel went through the STI process and she is set for the STIP construction of 2025. We are currently going into the preliminary design phase, so we're just before phase 1 on that chart. We're expecting about 5 to 7 years for full design and construction. And we're really working to front load the design of that to try to improve the process as much as possible. You can see the SketchUp of what we have at the moment, but that will likely change as we work through the design process. So after looking, when I came online, one of the first tasks that I got was to try to look at these contracts and see how can we do better? How can we improve the process? And we established a vessel contracting and construction work group. And we're trying to get all of the interested parties involved, try to get a consensus on what we can improve. We were able to get members of the NCDOT contract office, pre-qualification engineers, design build managers, the general counsel, deputy chief engineer, field support staff, attorney generals, and qualification engineers. In addition to this, we reached out to our peer agencies. We talked with the Cape May and Lewis Ferry. We talked with Texas DOT ferry folks and WashDOT ferry folks about how their processes work, and kind of the whole work group worked through the whole thing over several months. And we came up with 24 specific recommendations. The report, we do have a copy of it and we can forward it on to anybody who's interested. The 24 specific recommendations kind of broke it into 3 areas: pre-construction, delivery, procurement, and then construction. And we tried to summarize those into 4 main groups, kind of at a high level. We need to pre-qualify, we need to publicize, we need to package, and we need to prioritize. So pre-qualification, we need to try to expand our pre-qualification process, really with the technical capabilities and the financial capabilities of the shipyards that are building. Try to stay away from a passenger ferry situation. We need to publicize, we need to inform the shipyards, we need to inform the other design firms of our processes to try to generate interest. Unfortunately, our $10 million vessels do not generate a lot of interest in the $12 billion annual shipbuilding industry in the US. They're very small, relatively. We need to package. Standardizing our vessels is extremely important to us with operations, with our inventory, with training our crews. Keeping it as standard as possible is one of our needs to be successful. In addition to packaging, procuring multiple vessels at the same time, you get advantages of economies of scale. You could see yesterday in the cost difference between the Avon and the Salvo, it was almost $1 million cheaper with the second vessel. It also increases the contract value and gets more interest from the larger, more capable shipyards. And lastly, we need to prioritize. We need to look at what we're prioritizing in our contract language. We need to redefine our contract language and really focus on completion on time and high quality construction. We need to look at our incentives and what we can do there to try to encourage on time completion of high quality vessels. With that, that is the end of my report. I appreciate your time.
Okay, we'll take some questions now. Mr. Remy, I do have one question. In 2023, when we put the 2.5 million in the budget, at the time we were having problems with the vessel, can you break down the amounts and where that money was spent? Or if you can't, can we get someone to provide that information to the panel?
Yeah, we can provide that information.
Okay.
And most of it is going to go to the third party quality control for the extra time, but we can get you the exact.
Okay. I appreciate it. Any other questions from the committee? Chairman McKinnis.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you being here today. I'm looking at slide number 5. You've got the MV, Avon and Salvo led as a single contract for $24,381,000 total current contract amount. And then you've got down under bids, which I'm assuming the first two numbers there, the 11.8 and the 10.9 million are the bids for the ships there. And my math comes out, that's about 22 million, but you got 24 million up there on the bid. What's the difference in those two numbers?
They're the supplemental agreements. There was change orders. They're mutually agreed between Ferry Division and the contractor to try to improve the quality of the vessel.
Oh, change orders, that's a dangerous thing.
Supplementals.
All right, so the $1,000 a day liquidated damages. And I know you probably talked about it yesterday in our absence. We had to go to another meeting and I apologize, but who negotiated that amount of money? Where did that, was that an arbitrary number or somebody specifically come up with that number? Because I've never heard of $1,000 a day liquidated damage on a $22 million contract, especially when it's got this many moving parts and this much potential for a train wreck.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly where that came from. I do know NCDOT publishes amounts based off of contract values. But once I came into it, that was already set into the contract. So I'd have to look into that further to get you the exact reason.
All right, I'd like to know more about that because if we're doing that every day, it's a good opportunity for somebody just to pay the liquidated damages and not, because how many days are we overdue now?
Nearly 2 years.
So
About 600
days. And that $1,000 a day is for both vessels. That's not each. That's all the contract.
Correct.
So. All right, and then could you on slide 9, the 6.1 million, could you get a little bit deeper in the weeds on that as to what that's going to cover? And then finally, how much more are we going to pay? I mean, I heard you say litigation. I heard you say third party. I mean, it sounds like to me there's a lot of fingers in this pie.
Sir, the 6.1 includes the final outstanding on the contract and the additional 2.5 for costs outside of the contract, which would be our third party construction. We believe to the best of our knowledge right now that this will be the end of it, but with, as you know, with the litigation, it's uncertain.
Follow up.
Final. The third party, could you dig just a little bit deeper? And if you've already told that, I apologize, but needless to say I was not here. Just dig just a little bit deeper how that interfaces and intertwines in with the whole transaction. I'm not aware, and I've never heard of a third party involved in a contract.
Absolutely. We work through a company called Veris Global, and it's Veris Global is a company, and it's a bunch of retired ex-US Coast Guard inspectors that we hire to represent our interests inspecting the vessel. Because with these constructions, I mean, you need a daily presence to make sure that the construction is done safely, soundly. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources to be in Louisiana on a daily basis. So that's something we look to hire out through third party.
Okay, and how final. And how much did we pay for that service? That third party service?
Look up the total back to you, but it is a little bit expensive. I mean, I can look that up.
$1 million, $10 million?
Mr. Chair, maybe we can have him to get that information for you and send it to all of us.
Okay, please do. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Chairman Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. You've had to answer a lot of tough questions. Go back to the passenger ferry, slide 4, and the initial contract, it looked like Armstrong Marine. I'm really out of my lane here, but I am kind of a budget analyst type guy, and that variance was interesting where the final cost was 6.7 on this contract, and the blunt boats, the highest bid that came in was 6.4 almost, which is very close. Would you attribute the variance on this thing? I know the amount of time had a lot to do with it and the cost of materials, but I think it started pre-COVID actually. I don't know what the materials came in, and they also had construction issues with welding and all that. I remember all that, but how much is attributable to that delay or inflation in costs or some of all of that? Or can you figure out, because it looks like, and your pre-qualification, that's two questions, I guess. Your pre-qualification in the future, would that help with some of this if they're qualified to do the work? So can you speak to any of that?
Yes, sir. I appreciate the question. It's a great question. I don't know the exact numbers of how much the breakout was, but the quality control and at least from what I've seen, the rework was a significant portion of that. I think the COVID and the inflation was to a lesser extent compared to the quality control.
Okay,
particularly with the welding.
The welding, where they didn't know how to weld aluminum or some such thing.
Yeah, the standards were very tight. Aluminum, it's very thin. It can warp. It can crack. You really have to know what you're doing welding it. And our quality control inspectors, along with the U.S. Coast Guard, had significant concerns with what the contractor was doing.
Okay, just to comment, just as a budget guy, I'd like to see improvement in that pre-qualification and selecting the people who can do the work, if at all possible.
So I had a very intelligent man once tell me cheap is expensive.
Representative Loftus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. When did we purchase ferries prior to this cycle?
The last new constructions was 2011 and 2012. Before that was through the 90s. We had a bulk of what we're operating now were built in the early 90s.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Was there issues in 2011 and in the 90s compared to what we have now?
Yes,
You may not have been there then, but
from what I could tell, I was not there, but looking back through the records, there were, but to a much lesser extent.
follow up. Have we identified what caused that from way back then to prevent what we're doing now? And it may be such a long gap. I understand working environments change, economies change, but lessons learned probably from way back then. Did we utilize that to lessen the impact of what we're doing now?
Yes, sir. That is definitely high on my priority list of looking into. Is one thing we tried to include into this working group report. Should be happy to share, but I believe we were able to capture most of that in the recommendations of the work group.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Remy, we appreciate your presentation, being with us today. You've had a lot of tough questions, but thank you for being
Appreciate
here.
the opportunity.
And we're going to move on now because we are on a tight schedule. And at this time, I would like to mention that we have the chairman of the Department of Transportation with us today, and Chairman Faust. Are you still here? Just stand up and wave your hand at everybody. And also, we have a report this morning from our appointees to the Board of Transportation by the North Carolina General Assembly, and we're going to start with our former Senator Andy Wells, and then we have former Representative Chuck McGrady and Stephen Rosenberg. And it's good to have you all with us today. Look forward to what you have to share with us, Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Good to be here this morning. I've never heard anybody say that the Department of Transportation has a glorious history of managing money. In times past, all too often roads got built due to political deals rather than building roads where they were needed most. But at least in the past, there were glimmers of light. Somebody got their hand caught in the cookie jar, they felt bad. They just moved on, but they didn't do that again. They moved on to another cookie jar. And even deal makers felt uneasy about what they did. So it tended to stay in the back rooms, out of sight. Politicians still make deals, but they don't keep them secret anymore. They boast about them. The other day, Governor Cooper called President Biden's Porkfield infrastructure bill a great example, and he's right. It is a great example, but of what? of building roads where they are most needed, or of building roads where politicians want to use pork barrel money to make deals to build roads where politicians want instead of where they are most needed. Senator Tom Tillis put $110 million appropriation in Biden's bill to please a community that totals 40,000 people that wanted to build a $268 million bridge across the Alligator River. The bill passed, and Tillis thanked local officials for their lobbying efforts, which makes you wonder what goes into lobbying for $110 million. After the bill passed, Biden's willingness to pay $110 million toward a $268 million bridge drove that bridge to the top of DOT's priority list, which then sucked up another $158 million in state road building money. Now think this, $158 million was taken from roads and bridges that were needed in the other counties in your districts. In other words, a political deal moved 0.4% of the population ahead of 99.6% of the citizens, some of whom had greater road building needs. That's something to think about when you're stuck in traffic on I-40 or I-85. Year after year, politicians and bureaucrats tell us they're making road building plans that treat everyone fairly, but in fact, they've given us a messy planning process that is as transparent as a concrete bridge abutment. Like old-fashioned bullying, cutting political deals to push your way to the front of the line used to be frowned upon. If you did it, you tried to stay in the shadows. Now politicians cut deals in broad daylight. Biden proposes a bill, Senator Tillis adds a chunk of pork, and Governor Cooper crows that it's a great example of how things work. John Malden said recently about budget goals, which he identified as one, and I guess you could say that about me, quote, "It is getting lonely in my worry closet. Very few people truly care about government debt anymore. And for years, I've wondered why I care. Why the failure to protect the public's money matters so much to me." Then it clicked. Cancer. We've all dealt with it, some successfully, some not. But it's never easy to watch what cancer does to the body of a soul you love. Like debt, it starts small. The tiny tumor in my mother's breast. Surgical removal can help, but it still bears watching. Later, the pain in my mother's bones was treated as arthritis until the day her hip shattered, sliding out of the driver's seat. My young world changed. Our country is a mess. Our national debt has increased $10 trillion in the last 5 years, a 50% jump. And nothing was said by either of the presiding presidents. Nobody protested. So when governors ignore financial problems, it's hard to watch. Even little problems like tumors tend to grow. Politicians can argue that problems will take care of themselves. They might. It just takes time. That may be true, but may not be true. My mother's tumors took care of herself before she passed on at 49. House Bill 77 was a good first step to address some major missteps by the Department of Transportation. But it has not materially changed the financial operation inside the Department of Transportation. And a minority, 6 board members out of 20, appointed by the General Assembly, is not going to materially change the financial operations of the Department of Transportation.
Thank you. Mr. Wells. Representative McGrady.
Thank you. Glad to be back with some of my former colleagues. I've been asked to provide you with my thoughts on the current direction of the Department of Transportation. And I'd say, as a preface, when you talk about the direction of NCDOT, one must think of the department as a battleship or a cruise ship or a aircraft carrier, meaning that directional change doesn't occur quickly. It takes a while to turn a big boat. Change, though, did come to NCDOT when the department incredibly nearly ran out of money in 2019 and 2020. And the legislature passed a budget bill for the department, notably that was signed by the governor, and changed the structure of the board and gave responsibility, fiscal responsibility back to the board in terms of providing oversight. If you look at it politically, you can say, well, this occurred under the Cooper administration, but I'd be quick to note that the NCDOT secretary at the time served under two administrations, one Republican and one Democrat. So this isn't, in my view, a partisan issue particularly. So what has changed from my perspective? One, there's a lot more focus on the fiscal constraints in building transportation infrastructure, primarily roads. If you went to a board meeting 4 years ago and compared the board meeting today, you would note that there's more time spent on trying to figure out what it is we've got in the pipeline and how we're going to align those expenditures with the money that we expect to have coming in. So the board is doing what the legislature directed us to do. We spend a lot more time dealing with finances, and there are fiscal constraints that are being actively discussed. There's actually more transparency. When I came to the board, we received a lot of information, but it was very hard to figure out what was important given the amount of information we were given. And with some outside help, consulting help, the communications that come from our staff to the board are easier to understand, and you don't have to take a deep dive to figure out what the key issues are. And I found that most decisions are data driven. And as a board member, I've been satisfied when I have questions about this expenditure or that with the transparency in the data. With that said, my frustration has been that it's really hard to, let's say, look at the budget of the General Assembly and the direction given to the department there, and then see it on the back end when we're looking at the budget of the department. There's not a lot of good alignment there, and it makes our job very, very hard. The department is a part of the Cooper administration, and it reflects the values of the administration. Probably more focus on climate change or diversity, equity, inclusion than you might find in another administration. But that's elections have consequences, and the department is doing its job in that regard, reflecting who is actually in charge. I'd end by just saying that this is a work in progress. I've seen a lot of change during my 2 years on this board. Directionally, the change is right. Does change need to continue? In my opinion, it does. We need more transparency. We clearly need to continue to focus on the fiscal constraints and not get back in a position we were before, where We had projects we were committed to, but we had them put in the plan with numbers that didn't reflect their true value, what it was going to cost to build them. And I think this is a work in progress, and there's plenty of work to be done. And I look forward to working with the legislature to address some of these issues.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have Mr. Rosenberg come make his presentation. Thank you all for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to also thank this body for appointing us. I was the first non-elected member being appointed to the board. And when the speaker did that, he said, go over there and fix things. I have a background in finance and road building and construction. But Senator McGinnis told me the first time I met him, he said, you understand what you do there at board meetings? And I said, no, sir. He said, you decide where you're going to eat dinner. That's what board meetings are. And we've tried to make a difference, but I think what you did in Bill 77 was significant, but you've charged us with fiscal responsibility without giving us fiscal authority. And that's really when you have people who spoke like Andy and Chuck, very intelligent, experienced people. That's very frustrating to be given a task that you can't execute. I think that what we're dealing with is a situation where the department doesn't know how to deal with this issue of fiscal responsibility. The time devoted to actual issues we face is very little. And again, it's the nature of the board and the composition. One of the things that I was asked to do today by my colleagues is summarize some suggestions, because we think that the legislature is really concerned about this issue, as they should. We're one of the largest, if not the largest, departments in the state. Maybe we need an elected secretary. Maybe we need more board members appointed by the legislature or appointed by other executive officers in state government. We're putting out some suggestions. We don't have all the answers for that. What we really wanted to do was ask you that we could return in 90 days to come back with some more detail, give us the opportunity to speak with you in your House and Senate committees, speak to you individually, to get your ideas. We want to come back with a firm plan. Again, the 6 members appointed by the legislature are intelligent, experienced, hardworking people, and we want to make a difference under the direction given to us by the legislature. But there's going to have to be some adjustment to allow that to happen. The whole structure of the board is one that is not structured in a way that you get meaningful discussion about the topics that we face. And as you all know, we face a shortfall in revenue, and that shortfall is $7 billion. We've been working with some recent information that, if I understand it properly, it might be $7 billion a year over the next 5 years, if in fact all of the STIP, all of the requirements that everybody wants. One of the things that all of us are concerned about on the board is that we only have X dollars. We can't be telling municipalities that we're going to do things we don't have the money to do, and they go ahead and spend thinking we're going to build a road or build a bridge, the money they have to spend. And I think that we really need more clarity with respect to the community. And one of my little pet peeves is inflation. If I asked each of you what the inflation rate would be, I would think you would give me something over 8%. Well, we had long debates and came up with 3% at the board. And I don't want to take your time, but I'm happy to get back with you anytime and explain why it was deemed 3% was more politically appropriate than the 8, 10, or 12 that I see in the construction industry. But I think in summation, Mr. Chairman, we want to answer any questions that the committee has. And again, we would like the opportunity to come back after some further discussion with individual members. Thank you.
I think it would be more appropriate to schedule another time where we could take more time and go into more detail as far as questions from the body. If that would be okay with the chairs, is that okay? Okay, we're going to move on now. We've got the North Carolina Turnpike Authority here. We've got Mr. J.J. Eden, Executive Director, Dennis Jernigan, Acting Chief Engineer, David Roy, Chief Financial Engineer, and my favorite one in the group is Chad Kimes, Division 3 Engineer, that it happens to be my engineer and Senator Lazar and Chairman Eiler's engineer. So you all would come. We'd look forward to hearing your presentation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
When can we expect to have this additional meeting?
We'll sit down and we'll get with everyone and we'll discuss that at another time. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to present today on the North Carolina Turnpike. I'm going to start. Let's see here. Just to advance. There we go. On the agenda here, we're going to talk about tolling in North Carolina, what projects we have currently going, a P3 overview, and other projects that we're looking at in the future. So to start, tolling in North Carolina, basically why tolling? Why do we start this? Basically to faster project delivery, mostly on the finance side, more travel options. Every one of our roads has a free alternative currently. Improved travel times, such as the managed lane projects, additional funding sources, and support for growing populations as we're seeing statewide. This is our mission statement. You could read it too. The North Carolina Turnpike Authority is committed to delivering innovative transportation using technology and financial means to actually deliver projects faster, more efficiently, and use different means to deliver those projects. On behalf of local planning organizations, and that's key. We don't just go out and solicit roads. They have to come into us, providing drivers with more choices on their commute. So we have a toll policy process. So basically, that the legislature have laid out for us. The initial project identification comes from the local planning organizations, the MPO and the RPOs, and they sponsor and submit the projects through DOT, and they're tested for, feasibility, toll funding, and overall feasibility. Initial feasibility testing also we work constantly with the MPOs and RPOs and the sponsors to evaluate how we're going to move these projects forward. The projects after screening go back to the MPOs and RPOs so they can see what shortfalls they have, what maybe gaps in funding or alignment changes or anything as we move forward. And then prioritization and programming. The project then it actually becomes a turnpike project, and we move forward with figuring out how to actually deliver the project. What's the best type of project to deliver for the community in that point. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about we just switched over our whole back office system. Those who have an account with this have gotten a lot of emails and text messages and everything to make sure that the public was aware. It's back up live, and we have a new website that we push the website because it's easiest to understand, but basically it's a whole back office billing system. It allows us to accept different types of payments now. We'll call them the more modern payments, the Apple Pay, the Google Wallet, and PayPal and all that stuff and that style. So that's up and running. We're still working on it, so we're going to see some things going forward with that. First billing cycle is coming up in a couple of weeks. So with that, Dennis Jernigan, our acting chief engineer, is going to walk through some of our projects.
Good morning.
So the Turnpike Authority operates under powers vested by the General Statute 136-89.183. And we have a number of projects that are in various phases from planning to complete. As JJ mentioned, all of our projects are approved by local, rural, or metropolitan planning organizations and subject to prioritization in accordance with the STI legislation. If you'll look at this particular slide on the bottom, you'll see a list of the projects that are currently in our program, and they're color coded. By on the left, you see we have 3 that are currently open to traffic, 2 that are under construction, 4 that are under development. And I think this is a PDF instead of the PowerPoint. So I'm going to stay here for just a minute. So if you'll notice the projects in green, and I'm going to go through these one by one in the subsequent slides, but the projects in green are the facilities that are currently open to traffic. The ones in the lighter blue are under construction. We currently have 2 projects under construction, and then 4 in the darker blue are under development. I'll also point out to you that if you'll notice, a significant number of these projects are in the Charlotte and Raleigh area. A recent study by DOT called NC Moves 2050 found that by the year 2050, North Carolina's population is going to increase by 4 million people. 2/3 of that population growth is going to concentrate in the Raleigh and Charlotte region. So if you'll notice that the bulk of these projects are in those regions, the local planners, the local transportation planners are anticipating that growth, which is one of the reasons why they're looking to Turnpike to be another tool in their toolbox. So I'll start off with the Triangle Expressway. This is the toll facility that's been open the longest. I assume most of you are familiar with that. It is on the west side of Raleigh in the RTP area. It's about 19 miles. It consists of about 3 miles of NC 885, formerly 147, and NC 540, opened to traffic in January 2013. Portions opened a little bit earlier than that, so we recently had a 10-year anniversary, if you will, on part of that. It was North Carolina's first modern toll road, and it was designed from inception as all electronic tolling. There are no toll booths on this facility. We either collect tolls through transponders or bill by mail, which is taking a picture of license plates. This particular facility currently has between 20,000 and 50,000 vehicles per day. Of course, the volume ranges depending on what part of the facility you're on. An extension of that is currently under construction. Complete 540 phase 1 is the blue portion that the lighter blue portion that you see on the bottom. Complete 540 phase 2 is currently under procurement. And these 2 projects will finish out the 540 outer loop around Raleigh. Even though they're shown as 2 phases, they're actually made up of 5 different projects. Phase 1 is 3 projects. Phase 2 is 2 projects. Again, it's going to be about 29 miles. And then once we're complete, about 41 miles of the 69 making up the 540 portion will be tolled. This facility will provide increased mobility, reduce traffic congestion, provide, as JJ said, additional travel options in the region, as well as providing linkage to municipalities on the right side of the east side of Raleigh to the west, and from folks down in the south in the Johnston County area and points east as well. The next project I'll talk about is the Monroe Expressway, but actually the reason why you see a lot of lines and a lot of colors on this map is because in the Charlotte region, there's a tolling network that we're currently working on. So as I talk about each facility, you'll see a pin, as you do here on the bottom right. The bottom right is the Monroe Expressway. It is a bypass of the town of Monroe. This particular project was opened in November of 2018. It's just under 20 miles. And where the Triangle Expressway is a 6-lane facility, this one is a 4-lane facility. It too is all electronic tolling. And by using this facility, you bypass over 24 traffic signals along US 74, previous US or current old existing US 74. We range from about 12,000 to 24,000 vehicles per day. And unlike Triangle Expressway, where some of the volume is heavier at differing points, the volume here on Monroe Expressway increases as you head west toward the city of Charlotte. We consistently have 11 to 12% trucks on this facility, a lot of truck traffic on Monroe Expressway. The next facility is what we call I-77 North. This is a series of express lanes. It's 26 miles long, extends from the northern part of Charlotte north from there. It was NCDOT's first public-private partnership. And the Turnpike Authority's role in this particular project is we're responsible for toll collection and customer service. But this project is operated by a concessionaire. I-77 Express Lane South is the next project that we'll talk about. This particular one is 11 miles long. It extends from the 77 North project down to the South Carolina line. We are currently continuing traffic studies and alternatives analysis for this particular section. Currently, right away from the South Carolina line to I-77 is scheduled to begin in FY 2029. However, that is the developmental phase of the STIP, which means it's farther out than 5 years. And so it's subject to reprioritization. So that is subject to change. I-485 express lanes is currently under construction. And you can see on the bottom there, the sort of the smiley face one on the bottom. This is 17 miles of express lanes between US 74 and 277. It is being administered by the local highway division, Division 10. There are 2 new interchanges and new general purpose lanes between Ray Road and Providence. Again, the purpose of this is with the express lanes are to provide reliable travel times between I-77 and US 74. As with the 77 North project, the Turnpike Authority's role on this is we will manage the toll collection and the customer service aspect of the facility. US 74 express lanes extends from I-485 into downtown Charlotte. Is actually comprised of 2 different projects, almost 11 and a half miles in length, converting a lot of the at-grade interchanges to grade separations, also adding some additional general purpose lanes. It's made up of 2 different projects. NCDOT is taking the lead on one project, and DOT and Turnpike are working together on the second one. If you're familiar with the Charlotte area, Idlewild Road is pretty much the dividing point. One of the projects is around 6 miles long, and the other is 5. And finally, Mid-Currituck in the northeastern corner of the state is a 7-mile toll project including 2 bridges, one over Currituck Sound and one over Maple Swamp. There's a 4.7-mile bridge over the Sound and then another 1.5-mile bridge over the Maple Swamp area. This is the one turnpike project that is planned for cash collection. We're also widening on NC-12 at the bridge terminus. The project has been involved in legal action, but the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals recently affirmed the lower court's ruling in favor of NCDOT. And finally, if you want information on Turnpike and or additional information on some of these projects, our FY 2022 annual comprehensive financial report is available online. The link is there at the bottom. We also have a couple of hard copies with us today, if anyone would like those. And with that, I will turn it over to David Roy, our Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Chair, but just a process question, please.
Yes, Chairman Sawyer.
So since we're a paperless committee, I noticed that some of this presentation wasn't online, but I believe, Nick, did you say now that it is online? So the presentation that we just saw is now online and everything else afterwards? Okay, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a question, and if it needs to be.
What we'll do is after all the presentations, we'll do questions, and I appreciate it.
Great,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Again, my name is David Roy. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Turnpike Authority. Sorry. Yeah. So we know there is always a lot of interest in and questions around P3s. So wanted to take just a few minutes to talk at a very high level about P3s, kind of provide a 30,000 foot view of P3s. So first, what is a P3? Well, we have FHWA's definition up on the screen. P3s are long-term contractual agreements between a public agency and a private entity to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain an infrastructure project. P3 involves private sector taking on additional project risks. Kind of at the core of what a P3 is, it's an agreement between a public agency and a private entity to allow for greater involvement from the private sector in project delivery. And hopefully, if everything is executed correctly, there's mutual benefit to both parties. In North Carolina, the legislative authority for the department to enter into P3s is found in 136-18. Essentially, it allows the department and or the Turnpike Authority to enter into up to 3 P3 agreements. And with that, it allows the department to assign the power to charge and collect tolls as payment for that facility if it is a toll project. So what are the various P3 delivery models that are out there in the world today? I like this matrix because it really lays out the various iterations of P3 from traditional project delivery all the way down to a true design, build, finance, operate, and maintain model, which we'll talk about more in just a second. So at the top of the matrix here, you have your traditional delivery, a design, bid, build. That is the vast majority of the projects that are led by the department and most departments across the country. In that model or under that model, the department develops and designs a project and then lets the construction of that project. So your risk allocation is really only on the construction side. Kind of moving down the matrix, you get into alternative delivery, and the most kind of prevalent model there is design build. That is on some of the larger, more complex projects you've seen across the state. Under that model, the department tries to elicit innovation in design and delivery from the private sector by letting a contract that involves both design and construction, thereby allocating both design and construction risk to the private sector. Moving down beyond that, you really get into your P3 models, introducing a finance component in the DBF, a design build finance, typically short-term financing under that structure, as well as various operations and maintenance models that really look to optimize life cycle costs, if you will, in both design, construction, and maintenance. And then finally, at the bottom of this matrix, you get into the true design, build, finance, operate, and maintain, where you really kind of soup to nuts turn the project over to the private sector for delivery. And I think when most folks think of P3, the design, build, finance, operate, maintain model, DBFOM, if you will, is really what you think about typically. And under this model, there are really two types of payment structures or compensation structures for the developer: an availability payment and a revenue risk model. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. Now, that's a lot of information to digest, so I'll pause here for a second. So again, under a true DBFOM model, there are really two types of payment structures. One, an availability payment. You can see that on the left side of your screen there. This is for projects that typically do not contain a dedicated revenue stream, or for projects if it is told where the public entity prefers to maintain the rate setting flexibility and thereby the revenue risk. And when I say revenue risk, I mean the risk that the revenues that are seen on the project do not meet those that are forecast under in the development phase. Under an availability payment structure, the public agency typically agrees to pay a private entity a fixed amount over the life of the contract to deliver that project. And again, if it is a toll facility, for example, that would mean that the public agency would retain the revenue risk on that deal. On the other side, the right side of your screen there, you have a demand risk or a revenue risk model. This is typically found in toll facilities, whereby the developer is allowed to charge and collect tolls for development of that facility, and that is how they are compensated. Again, that's kind of a true revenue risk deal, whereby the developer assumes the risk that toll revenues on that facility do not meet what was forecast in the project development phase. And that's what you have on the I-77 North Express Lane facility, for example. So I know that was just a very kind of 30,000-foot view of P3s. I believe we'll take questions at the end, but certainly happy to entertain those at the appropriate time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chad Combs, and I'm a division engineer out of Division 3 on the Great Coast of Southeast North Carolina. Happy to be here today. But what I'm going to talk about today are two high-profile, unfunded projects in our part of the state. First one here, I hope most of you recognize this bridge here, Cape Fear Memorial Bridge out of Wilmington here. This is one of 3 movable span bridges that we have remaining in Southeast North Carolina Division 3. Basically, this bridge here is approximately 54 years old. And just to give you a little bit more overview on this bridge, basically what we call the life expectancy is about 10 years on the movable span portion and 20 years on the fixed span. And what that means is we will have a major rehab on those two different types of spans within 10 years. We just recently finished one in 2019 for a cost around $15 million. We will continue to do this more and more frequent as we go into the future. Just yearly maintenance costs on this bridge alone is anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. This includes the bridge tenders that work on it and just everyday maintenance. Currently, we've got about close to 60,000 cars a day on it. It shows a projection of 80,000 cars a day on this bridge by 2045, but we're projecting to see that much sooner with the growth in the area. And also keep in mind that the state ports is a mile south of this bridge, which is used daily by the state ports. So after we did the project back in 2019, we decided to do a feasibility study to look at the replacement of this bridge. And you'll see 4 options here. I want you to just concentrate on option number 2, because currently today, when the bridge opens to a vessel, we have a clearance of 135 foot. So we would prefer to go back with a 135-foot clearance fixed, and where we do not have to continue to maintain a movable span bridge. But you can see the number there is around $400 million to replace one structure. As we dive into the funding part of it, you can see in the past couple of prioritization cycles in 5.0 and 6.0, we actually entered it into it to see how it would score. Back in 5.0, and this was about 4 years ago, it only scored a 53. The lowest score in prioritization on the statewide that got picked up was 34.6. And I know those numbers probably don't mean much to you, but we went back and added up the cost of the projects from the one that got funded to Cape Fear, and there's about $20 billion worth of projects in between the two. So we're far off from getting this funded in the statewide category. So approximately about a year ago, the WMPO, our planning partner in Wellington, passed a resolution for DOT to look at all possible funding options to replace this bridge. So once that was passed, the division with DOT, the Turnpike counterparts here with me today, and also our planning partners, kicked off this study on looking at all options on how to fund and replace this bridge. I just talked about traditional funding. That's number 1 there. We will continue to go through prioritization and trying to get this to score into the STIP. Number 2, we're going to be looking at traditional tolling. We just recently kicked off a traffic and revenue study to see exactly what a toll would cost and where does that traffic go if you do implement a toll. Number 3, alternative delivery. This one popped up at the end of 2020. We actually received an unsolicited proposal for a public-private partnership that came in. And after much discussions, after many presentations with all the different local municipalities and the counties, the WMPO decided not to move forward with that unsolicited proposal. Still an option, but currently right now it's on hold. Lastly here, grants. You'll hear us talk a lot about grants since the federal infrastructure bill passed. There's a lot of availability of grants. We will be pursuing those grants, possibly for this project as well. Keep in mind that grants, there's no guarantee for a grant, and you also have to have a match for those grants, and that can be anywhere from 20 to 50%. And any grants you can receive can help offset the cost on some of these other options. One other large project I want to talk about is Carolina Bays Parkway, and you're going to see a map up here. It's got a lot of spaghetti on it, and I apologize for that. But this project is important to the state. This is really an interstate project between South Carolina and North Carolina. 31 currently has South Carolina currently has a bypass, South Carolina 31, that goes around Myrtle Beach that will be bypassing Little River. That will come into North Carolina. That is a 6-lane facility coming into the state of North Carolina. What you see here in the middle here is all the different options we're looking at. And one thing to note about the history on this project is back in 2016, Horry County passed the capital project state sales tax, which went toward this project. So South Carolina is fully funded. North Carolina is fully unfunded, if that's such a thing. Sorry about that. So in 2024, they will proceed with right-of-way, and in 2025, they will proceed with construction. The current status of this, North Carolina is the lead agency on the merger process, on studying these alternatives. It is expected within the next couple of weeks, we receive the draft environmental impact statement showing all the impacts on these 8 alternatives. We will then release that to the public, and we will hold public hearings this summer, and the final alternative will be chosen this fall. And that's called what we call the LEPA decision. So just want to just restate again, once the final alternative is chosen, South Carolina is off and running. So in years past, we have entered this into prioritization, and once again, it's not getting picked up into the statewide category. You can go back to P 5.0 and see it was scoring around a 61, where the lowest project got picked up again was around 74. Once again, we're several $billions away from getting this picked up into prioritization. We started looking a little bit at tolling, and we're going to dive into that more details as the final alternative is chosen. It's a little early to really be studying tolling, but that will be a potential option on how to fund this. We will continue to pursue this in the prioritization as well. The next prioritization cycle will actually start in about September. We're just like Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, we'll continue to look at potential grants out there to try to reduce the cost so it can score better. And we'll also look at other alternative deliveries that's already been discussed here earlier. Some of the other items of divisions that we have started looking at is what can we do to reduce the cost to help it score better. And this is going, more thinking along the lines, let's at least get a footprint into the state of North Carolina. So maybe not an interstate type facility right off the bat, but maybe bringing it down to a super street type facility, which will reduce the right of way, and also segmenting the project. Let's do pieces instead of the entire project all at one time. And really, those are 2 high-profile projects that are very important to the state of North Carolina and to that part of that region. So thank you.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about I-95. So I was with the department when this project was hot, and then left for a while, corporate America, and then came back. So I remember this one. I'm going to go over history a little bit first. So in 2003, you can see we had a feasibility study. We continued through to a border toll. We spent a lot of time looking at border tolls, at both state lines. We went into a planning study in 2011, 2012. We have received a grant in conditional approval for to move into the ISRPP. And then 2016, the study was complete. And right after that, we terminated the agreement with the federal highways. So planning and finance study, these are some of the things we went through at that time. We looked at doing it in phases. At that point, one of the main reasons for doing this was to widen a lot of sections of 95, particularly to the South Johnson County down to the South Carolina border, and improve the interchanges. So we went through the reconstruction. We worked closely with the USDOT that participate in the ISRPP. And subsequently completed the planning and finance study that included all the elements, included their environmental, economic, express, border, all of the above. And as I said, we formally withdrew after that. So current status, where are we today? So the department was awarded a couple grants since then. So I-95 and US 70 grant, and the I-95 Resiliency Innovative Technology Improvements for the corridor. So you'll see here that in the bright red, what's under construction. is currently under construction, and the orange there is currently unfunded. So basically, there's about $1.75 billion in construction being built as we speak, and unfunded is about 4.9 billion. So so a lot of the widening, especially in the areas that we were concentrating on originally, is already being constructed. So basically, that's where we are with that. So, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a lot of information. I know we have a lot of questions. We'll open that up now for this panel for questions. Representative Loftus.
We breezed through we withdrew. What did we withdraw from? Why did we withdraw from it? For us new people that haven't been here before, when you say we withdrew, I'm just curious. Thank you.
So, sure. There was a federal program to allow tolling in the interstates back then. And I believe there was 3 or 4 that were let. North Carolina was one of them. And we were part of that. We were granted permission to toll the interstate, because normally you can't toll an interstate unless you add capacity. Right. So like right now we have the sections under construction for widening. So if we told it, we really wouldn't be adding any more capacity. And why withdrew? If my memory serves me correct, there was a lot of public opposition. The study at that point showed a lot of diversion, especially of truck traffic off of 95 when we told it, where trucks would try to divert around the toll gantries. So.
Further question, Chairman Sawyer.
Hey, thank you so much. I have a series of questions. I almost wish that we could have asked questions after each presentation. There's a lot of information and a lot of misinformation about these very important subjects out there. And so I'm going to try to clarify a few of those points. One point that I want to ask for in regards to the Wilmington projects and the bridges, I understand that they didn't qualify for statewide funding, but that's not the only bucket of money available to MPOs and divisions to construct projects. If they didn't score well in the statewide, was there an attempt to score them in the local dollars?
Chad.
It's a great question. Keep in mind, remember the bridge is around $400 million. That would wipe out. We basically don't have enough funds in the division and regional pots to be able to pay for that size of project. So you have to look at the statewide pot.
Okay, follow up, please. Is it okay, Chair, if I ask? Okay. Second question then is, I saw that you had a good stakeholder process in the Wilmington area in regards to tolling. As someone who's from a tolling community, I can understand the angst around that. Did you say that option's off the table for the replacement of this bridge as far as what the locals are asking for?
So we're still currently looking at all options. That's where the WMP opened it back up. So we will continue to go back to that planning organization. All options are still on the table.
Thank you, Chair. I'll have other questions as the committee goes forward.
Chairman McInnes.
If you would, sir, step back up on the.
You're on the hot seat today.
I believe I heard you say, sir, that you're doing a study now on the toll and the number of vehicles and what the toll would be for that bridge. Have we got any clarity or any thing that you can report as to? I know you've got the number, of course, of cars that were running about 65,000. I think I saw somewhere in there a day. So what would be a amortization schedule that you would use using a tolling method to pay for that bridge? Do you have a prognostication on that?
So not at this time. That study was just kicked off, I believe, January. So we're right at the initial part of that study. That study should be wrapped up by the end of this calendar year. And at that point, we will have all those answers on those numbers.
So do you have an idea of what a reasonable amortization schedule would be as far as years that it would have to be told to pay $400 million in today's money?
I'm going to defer that.
We won't know, sir, about
Well, as Chad mentioned, we'll have a lot more information about that once the study is complete. Obviously, a lot of factors go into that. Typically, for a traditional toll project, you're kind of limited to what you can go out to the public and finance to about a 35-year period, though.
Okay, that was what I was, if you were going long term, or you're gonna have a higher toll and a shorter term. So you're talking about a lesser toll and a longer term.
Historically, that's the approach we pursued on turnpike-driven projects. But again, public financing kind of limits you to about a 35-year period.
Okay, and I got one more if I can,
Yes,
if I
sir.
can jump in on I-95. We're wherever the I-90. Okay, yes, sir.
I'm here.
On I-95, I think I'm right, and correct me if I'm not. We cannot toll at either state line,
That's correct.
and that is
Interstate-
because of a change in the law relevant to its constitutionality.
Interstate commerce.
Okay.
Yep.
So what about an express lane? Like they have on I-77, where you're not tolling the whole thing, just the express lane? Is that something that's available to us, or is that out of the game too?
So right now, the sections where they've already widened, you can only toll new capacity. So if we were adding another lane, then yes, right? But there's already added the lane, they already went to, added another lane south of Johnson County and south they're working on. That's almost $2 billion worth of work. We would not be able to toll that again unless we add it. The sections that are unfunded, but then you're kind of splitting it up.
Final question.
Okay.
On I-95. You've got the $4.9 billion. Does $4.9 billion in today's money totally modernize I-95 to brand new 2023-24 interstate standards, or is that an additional amount of money on top of the $4.9 billion?
It's to improve, to widen 95, as my understanding is to widen the roads, improve the interchanges to today's standards.
Okay, and that doesn't include the bridges and anything like that. That's
would
just a
widen-
minimal amount
that
of
would widen-
modernization.
That would widen the bridges and all the lanes for travel there.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Representative Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the gentleman who was just up there, I would like to have more information about the revenue with the project in Mecklenburg County. Because I have been receiving a lot of questions from constituents who are going to go to the media about this revenue, that the state is responsible to pay so much money when they don't get in a certain amount of money from the contractor over that I-77 project. And I have been trying to get information about that and have not been able to get it. And I was happy that he brought that up today, because I've heard it from previous legislators who was here when that happened. So I would like to have more information about that so I can get it to the people who've been asking that question, to hear that we are actually paying for a road that we do not own. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and I believe you're actually scheduled to have a presentation from I-77 North, or I-77 Mobility Partners here later today. But to answer your specific question about what the department is on the hook for, if you will, there is what's termed a DRAM. It's a mechanism whereby, as opposed to the department putting in more dollars up front, they allocated up to $75 million should revenues not be sufficient to cover debt service. So the department's obligation to help support debt service is capped at 75 million, and to date, none of those dollars have been called upon.
Is there a way that I can get that information?
Absolutely, we can provide you a lot more information around that subject.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Senator Murdoch.
Yeah, I just, since staff is here, I had a question around the turnpike processing fees, since it's an increase is proposed in the agency bill filed out of the House.
Who would like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I just wanted more background around the increase, and bear with me, my laptop is not working. I'm reading this off of my phone. But in section 21, increased turnpike processing fee for billing, we're going up from $6 to $9. And for that 12-month period, and or for the overall 12-month period, going from $48 to $72. So just wanted more background around that hike in that fee.
I'm sorry. My name is David Roy. I'm the Chief Financial Officer with the Turnpike Authority. That's correct. We're requesting a processing fee increase from $6 to the $9. That $6 fee was established in legislation back in 2011 and has not been raised since that time. So obviously, over the last 10 plus years, we've seen significant increase in operating costs. So that is really to address that. It's important to note, I think, that the processing fee is only assessed on invoices where there are past due amounts. So you do not receive a processing fee on your first invoice. Only if you receive an invoice, do not make payment of that toll, then you would receive a processing fee on the subsequent invoices. And the calculation with the 48 to the 72, it's just we are allowed to charge $6 processing fee on up to 8 invoices in a calendar in any 12-month period. So that 72 is just that same calculation.
So it's that top cap that went up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Chairman Lazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure who can answer this, but earlier we heard about the Alligator Bridge and Senator Tillis allocating $110 million. Did we have any input in that in terms of where a potential project could be at a higher level of need than the Alligator Bridge? We talked about the Wilmington Bridge. Did we have any input in where that money went or should have gone?
Not from the Turnpike side. I can't speak to the department on that. So, as I mentioned, the Turnpike gets its projects on a flow down. So on that side. So.
Follow up.
And it may not be for the Turnpike. Just in general, that money was allocated for a particular reason. And I didn't know if we had any input based on what North Carolina's needs are, and why that bridge was chosen over others.
And just a little more context, JJ's correct that it's obviously a department-led project. That was a grant that the department pursued and was awarded specifically for that project. So once that grant was awarded, they're required to pursue it on that project, not another one. And you want to
follow up?
Yes, sir.
So what I'm hearing is that our department, DOT, requested a grant for that specific project.
Yes, so I just want to address it from a Division 3 perspective. So each division can go out and look at these potential grants out there. The big thing is you got to go out there and find a match for it. Once you find a match, there's requirements on these grants. So for Alligator River, which is outside of my division, was much further along the process than we are on the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. So one of the big criteria to go after grants is this planning document. We just kicked off the planning document on Cape Fear Memorial, but that will get you further down the road on being able to go after grants. So we will be doing the same things that did in Division 1 and pursuing every grant we can for these types of projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this brings a little bit more clarity. When we heard that it was more port directed than not, we actually had an input in it because it was a grant application for that particular project. So it makes quite a bit more sense. Thank you.
More questions? Yes, sir. Representative Adams.
On this Alligator River Bridge project, can anybody here give me a accurate traffic count that bridge carries today?
They don't have one, sir.
I don't have one. Okay.
Would you like to request one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Make note of that. Chairman Eiler, and then I'll go back to Chairman Sawyer.
I'll be okay to defer to Chairman Sawyer and save my question to the last.
Okay, Chairman Sawyer.
Thank you. I'm ready for the punchline, Chairman Eiler. So I want to go back to some words that I heard about, specifically the I-77 Express Lane South in this presentation that caused concern and need clarification. During the presentation, I heard the words or the phraseology subject to change, looking for alternatives, and maybe 2029 or further. As someone who lives in this area and gets constant questions about this project, those type of phraseology causes confusion and frustration to the citizens of Charlotte. So I just want to clearly state for everyone and ask this question: are 77 toll lanes coming to the southbound lane? That will happen. It's just a matter of time. Is that correct?
Again, David Roy, yes, the CRTPO, the local MPO, submitted managed lanes, tolled express lanes for the I-77 project, and that's currently what's being pursued, I-5718.
Yeah, follow up. Just so that, thank you for saying that, because for those of us who are new to the transportation world, when we hear things like CRTPO, it's not clear what that means. But from my understanding is that this was a decision that was made a long time ago. It's coming. So when I hear things about alternatives or subject to change, it's not that the fact that the road will be publicly funded. It means that you don't know if it's going to be elevated or if it's going to be widened. And is that correct? Or what form of financing that's going to take shape in, correct?
That's correct. They're currently in the development process to determine a preferred alternative, but the project is a managed lane facility, a tolled facility. One of the only questions is delivery method, whether it's a turnpike or is discussed at P3.
Thank you. Last one then. Thank you for that follow-up, because that is a great question, is do we allow the does the division ask the turnpike to manage this project or to allow a third party like we have on the toll lanes north? Those are the alternatives that you're talking about, not whether it's going to be tolled or not. So thank you for the clarification.
Chairman Aller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a series of questions in particular about some of the projects we've heard about. The bridge project in Wilmington and the Carolina-based Parkway. One of those is at the north end of my district and one's at the south end of my district. So I've gotten calls the last however many years I've been here about both of those projects. And also there's a project to take the railroad across the river closer to the port instead of going 33 crossings in Wilmington. So this is a huge project. However, I see that the Wilmington MPO, and I've not been attending that as much as I've done the southern end, the GSAT's MPO, but I heard that they actually backed off of their support for tolling. Am I mishearing that? Is that a rumor, Mr. Combs?
Is there Combs?
So yes, when we received an unsolicited proposal, they ultimately decided to reject that proposal. And not move forward with it. However, after about 6 months after that, they wanted us to go back and look at every potential option, including public-private partnerships or unsolicited proposals. So they put it back on the table.
Follow up on the Carolina-based Parkway. The perception is, well, first thing, I moved there 21 years ago in Brunswick County, and the population has doubled since I moved there. Another perception is that Raleigh and Charlotte get all the money. So we're not sure where, particularly connectivity is one of the criteria for the STIP. But connectivity to another state doesn't seem to score any points. So again, falling back to the MPO, there's not enough money to even make a dent. We have funded the studies for the Carolina-based Parkway by non-recurring grants in the budget for several years. And I understand there may be another ask to complete the studies. I heard a number from you one time. Can you make that public or not?
Let's see, we have spent about $7 million on this merger. This is a massive merger document. I'm studying a lot of alternatives, and I believe we're needing another $4 million to complete that.
That would be $4 million in this coming year or the biennium over 2 years?
This year.
This year. Okay, I just wanted to get that on the table.
Yeah, and this will be wrapped up this year.
I'm sorry, that's what we said last year. I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. I want to thank all the turnpike folks for being here in particular. I'm very interested in how a turnpike can play into this North and South Carolina project. Since we don't have votes, we're in the south end of my district. We're in the GSATs, Grand Strand Area Traffic Study, Transportation Study. We're in the GSATs MPO, and we don't have the votes they have with the Horry County, Georgetown County in South Carolina. We don't have the votes to impact what they do, and they certainly don't have enough money to make a impression on this project. So I hope everybody's open to that tolling word, but again, that's controversial everywhere you try to do it, as people in Charlotte can tell you. So I'm very interested in the future of this, and I know you'll keep me up to date on it. So again, just please pursue any avenues that we can. That's a comment, I guess, not a question.
Any more questions from the committee?
I do have one follow-up, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I mentioned the birthday of our lead on our team here, and I think there might be a surprise coming in the next couple of minutes on her behalf, but don't hold me to it.
Okay. Who else? Representative Adams.
Comment. I've heard the term data-driven a number of times in the last few meetings. I just want to say this. We have a project in Hickory that's probably 2.5 miles long. And I just want to, if I may, we have a project about 2.5 miles long in Hickory, and it's data driven. But I'm going to say something about data. Data is looking backward, and data gets old fast. If you're in the commercial real estate business like I am, you can look at an appraisal and it tells you what properties were once worth. But if you're selling someone's property, you want to look forward. You want to see what the market is. And that project in Hickory, we had a meeting about 6 years ago. And in that meeting, we revealed to DOT matters that probably saved them over $100 million because the data they were looking at was old. They failed to understand that a major project had been canceled. And the other thing I want to talk to about the presentations that I've seen here is this use of acronyms. I don't know who runs the acronym department at Department of Transportation, but I was once a technical writer, and I had to write manuals on fiber optics, on how you use fiber optics and equipment you use to operate the installations. We never used a single acronym because we were trying to inform people. We were trying to inform people about very specific actions they had to take and operations they had to do. Acronyms are not intended to inform. They may be culturally useful in the Department of Transportation, but they are baffling to people who are not in that culture. And I will say this, at the next meeting I come to, I want to have a cover sheet that shows me the meaning of each acronym that will be used in the presentation. Either that or spell out what the acronym means. I want to be informed. I want to make good decisions. I do not want to be sandbagged on what's going on. And I want to be able to help DOT make the best projects they can possibly make at the least expense. Thank you.
Representative McNeely, I don't think you're on our committee, and we don't usually do this, but I'm going to use my chairman's responsibility today to allow you to ask a question. You go right ahead.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that latitude, and I am working out of bounds, but I'm trying to learn. Just from listening though here this morning, it appears that quite a few MPOs are looking at different toll roads in their projects. And I would like to see our staff maybe reach out to the MPOs across North Carolina. And if there is a toll road discussion going on with them, if they would submit their meeting minutes back to us so that we can get an idea of who is thinking about tolling a road and who isn't, because I think that's critical in how we go about appropriating money.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Aller.
I feel the pain of Representative Adams. It took me several years to figure out some of these acronyms. However, during one of our budget discussions, our prior team leader that was here before, and it may still be around, gave us a little book of acronyms to start our, I think it's the conferencing with the Senate and so forth. So we'd all be on the same page. There's a small little book about acronyms. If that's still around, I'd like to provide that also in addition to the cover sheet. Provide that also if our esteemed team leader can dig that up from the archives, and because that was useful actually. It was an alphabetical list of all the acronyms used in DOT. But anyway, I'm just suggesting that if that can be made available, it would be nice. So,
thank you, Chairman Aller. We'll certainly work on that. Let's go ahead and move on with business today. If we don't have any more questions, I'd like to ask Mr. Rob Bovar to come, and he's going to do a presentation on I-77 Mobility Partners. So I think they're geared up for you this morning, Rob. Come right ahead.
Somebody's going to have to show me which one to use here. Advances to the right.
Advances to the right, reverses to the left.
Representative, I think you'd be glad to know I don't have any acronyms in my presentation here. Pretty straightforward. My name is Rob Bover. I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs for I-77 Mobility Partners. And I want to thank the members of this committee for allowing us to appear before you, because I think it's important that we talk about the success of I-77 Express. And what I want to do is I want to show you how I-77 Express is benefiting all of the drivers along the corridor and has proven to be an economic engine for the region. So what is I-77 Express? Well, here is a system map. The project entailed the reconstruction of 26 miles of roadway along the I-77 corridor north of Charlotte. It's actually 26.2 miles. And it runs essentially from the center of Charlotte, or close to the center of Charlotte, up to Mooresville. It was the addition of 2 optional express lanes per direction. You're going to hear that word from me quite a bit in this presentation, optional. The rehabilitation of the general purpose lanes, maintaining the same general purpose lane capacity, improved connectivity at I-85 and I-277. And for those who aren't familiar with Charlotte, I-277 is that road that runs around the center of the city. Added direct connectors to and from Lakeview and Hambright roads, and direct connectors they free up space in the entrance and exit ramps, and they allow drivers to directly access the express lanes or exit the express lanes. Constructed a new pedestrian tunnel under I-77 in Huntersville, new roundabouts on Griffith Street and Davidson, 3 of them to be exact. New sidewalks, bike lanes, lighting were added to 5 cross-street bridges in the corridor. It's a large undertaking, and this was done through a public-private partnership, a P3. There's my one acronym, by the way. A P3 between the North Carolina Department of Transportation and I-77 Mobility Partners, the first transportation P3 in North Carolina. And what this allowed North Carolina to do was take a limited amount of dollars and stretch that out. And what was created was an $800 million roadway that benefits the region and offered a new travel option to that region. So with the P3 model, the state retains ownership of the asset and sets the rules for the concession for the term of the agreement. This is important to remember. I-77 Mobility Partners does not own that stretch of the roadway. This is state property. Everything along it, all of the assets, state property, everything that we put in place belongs to the state. And the NCDOT has continuous oversight of the performance of the project. We work continuously with the NCDOT, with the NCTA. We must maintain that roadway to the highest standards. And I think we do that each and every day. This was done through an open and competitive state procurement process with an agreement that was entered into on June 26 of 2014. And the project was completed in only 5 years. From start to finish, only 5 years, this whole thing was done. And if some of you with long memories, if you remember, during the height of construction, we had extremely wet weather, we had extremely cold weather, and that was about the time of the steel tariffs, which threw the whole supply chain in the United States up in the air. The project now is providing improved mobility, reduced congestion, and reliable travel times to the region. I'll go into details on that in a moment. And that private investment through a P3 agreement allowed for the project to be completed years sooner than originally planned. Now, the NCDOT rightly planned to expand that part of the corridor, but through traditional funding, it wasn't expected to be done until 2035. Obviously, it was brought forward much quicker. And the NCDOT retains the highway and the facilities after the contract expires. So to speak, we hand off the keys. And I might add, this highway needs to be in pristine condition when we hand off those keys. An overview of the project. I keep forgetting to advance this, I'm sorry. An overview of the project, just to give you an idea of how much this entails. 250 lane miles, 19 toll gantries, 60 cameras, 1.4 million square feet of walls, 48 miles of fencing, 165,000 feet of guardrail, 2 million feet of striping, 420 acres of mowing done continuously, 27,000 delineators, 18 bridges. From fence to fence, we maintain this roadway. It's not just the expressway. We maintain fence to fence, the general purpose lanes and everything abutting them, and the express lanes and everything abutting them. And for those who are wondering, I mentioned direct connectors. The picture on the bottom there, that's Lakeview Road. That's a direct connector. And the picture on the top, that's the I-77 entrance and exit. Let's talk about the benefits here. So far, more than 33 million trips have been taken on I-77 Express, on the express lane since the beginning to as of January 2023. It is proving to be a very popular transportation option for the region. And it is having a direct economic effect upon that region. A study was recently done by a New York consulting firm, completed just last year. It was estimated that this roadway has had a $1.6 billion impact on economic output in the region. Beyond that, from that study, there's another couple of $100 million, and I'd be happy to show you this study. I have a copy of it with me here. $1.6 billion that we can count. It's been a job creator during construction. 4,646 jobs were created, 244 firms were engaged. And I know a point here that we're very proud of. A goal was set beginning construction for DBE, disadvantaged business enterprises. We exceeded that goal by 206%. And this work continues. It continues to the benefit of the region, and it continues to the benefit of drivers. These numbers here on the bottom that you're seeing, those are solely from 2022. 3,225 hours of roadside assistance. Something that I-77 Mobility Partners does is we offer free roadside assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you run out of gas, we'll bring you some gas for free. And the gas is free. If your tire blows out, we'll change your tire. If you need help on the road, in fact, that was my first week there. You can see that guy helping the stranded tram. For some reason, he decided a sports car would be good during a snowstorm. But yeah, so he obviously needed help getting off the road. This is done 24 hours a day. And I know that we take great pride in our response. We now respond to roadside assistance in 9 minutes. Try getting that from AAA. We replaced 4,353 delineators last year. What's the delineator? Those are those white pylons that separate the express lanes from the general purpose lanes. People run over them all the time. We mowed 2,800 acres, 920 miles of roadway did we sweep. We replaced 7,800 feet of guardrail, and we collected an awful lot of trash, 3,359 cubic yards of trash. All of this creates economic activity for the Charlotte region. Who are we? I-77 Mobility Partners is a local company. I've lived in Charlotte since 1999. All of my coworkers live in Charlotte. We work, live, and play in the region, and we are devoted to the region. Something that was started by my predecessor. I know that some of you know her, Jean Lear. She's a dynamic personality. She made it her mission to become a good corporate citizen, to make sure that I-77 Mobility Partners is seen that way. She looked around the region. She looked at things that were needed during the height of pandemic help. Food deserts, let's feed people. STEM education, let's devote money to this. So far, I-77 Mobility Partners has given over $500,000 since 2018 to local organizations. And I am in the advantageous position of handing out some of this money this year. And I'm looking forward to it. Our Drive for Community campaign, $125,000, $150,000 to regional food banks. We volunteered more than 3,300 hours of service. Take a look at that top left-hand photograph right there. Our employees came in on a Saturday to build a playground for a girl that's suffering from cancer. It was a wonderful event. That fellow Santa Claus right there, he's one of our lead technicians. We brought a truckload, $15,000 worth of gifts to the Ronald McDonald House. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, because we want to better our community. And as you can see, we devoted $140,000 to STEM education. Bettering the community. That's really what I-77 Mobility Partners is about. Congestion relief for all. This right here is the meat and potatoes of my presentation. This right here is what you need to remember. Managed lanes, the concept, they don't just help people in the express lanes. They help all drivers. Think about it in the simplest terms. If you're a driver who decides your option is to move over into the express lanes, you are freeing up space on the general purpose lanes, the free general purpose lanes. You are managing the flow of traffic. You are giving the choice. This is exemplified by the top left-hand graph up there. What I first want you to do is I want you to pay attention to the dotted red line. Now that dotted red line is the average flow of traffic, workday speeds prior to the start of construction. And as you can see, during the peak periods, morning rush hour, afternoon rush hour, dramatic drops in speeds. 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Look at 5 p.m. It's down below 50 miles per hour. Now look at the top. The top light blue line, that top light blue line is the speed in the express lanes for 2022. And as you might expect, it's pretty constant, pretty steady. But really pay attention to the dark blue line. The dark blue line there is the speed in the free general purpose lanes. And note the dramatic improvement in the average speeds. Take a look at that same area, 5 p.m. Look how much faster it's going. In 2022, 90% of the time, the general purpose lanes were above 60 miles per hour on the weekdays. If you are just adamantly opposed to paying any sort of fee to drive, it doesn't matter. You are still getting the benefit. In 2022, 100% of the time, the express lane speeds were at a free flow level. What is a free flow level? Well, under contract with the NCDOT, we must maintain a minimum speed in the express lanes of 45 miles per hour. We have to do that. And we did that 100% of the time last year. Now, what's important to remember is that we made these advancements despite the fact that there is now 20% more traffic along that corridor than there was in 2015. More people are moving to Huntersville, more people are moving to Davidson, more businesses are moving to the region. So there's a lot more traffic. And yet we are still seeing an increase in speeds. And we're doing that because of the managed lanes, because of the choice that people have to move left or right. Something else that I think that is important to point out, and something I know that our team is extremely proud of, the bottom right-hand graph. The road is simply safer than it was. This is measured in 100 million vehicle miles traveled, VMT. Prior to the start of construction, 196. Now, there was a peak during the peak of construction because we've all been through construction zones. People drive crazily. They follow too close, they're weaving in and out, they get impatient, fender benders galore. But what happened once the road opened? Dramatic drop down to 103. More than 90% drop in the traffic accident rate. Why? Because people are now moving at a reliable, predictable speed, and the roadway is just in better condition. They're moving that way despite, again, higher speeds, and despite higher traffic, we are still seeing a safer road. So let's say you decided to take the express lane. How did it work? Well, it's based on segment-based express lanes. Option, I've used that word before. I told you, I warned you, we're going to see it. You have always the option to move into the express lanes. But this is a decision that is always informed. So well before you move to a segment of the express lanes, and by the way, there's 11 on each side, you will see a toll gantry, quite large, and it will have the price for that segment that time of day. And you decide, let's say you're heading to Huntersville for a meeting, you see a couple of brake lights in front of you in the general purpose lanes, and you think to yourself, well, okay, I'm going to merge over. You see the sign, that's the price, and you decide, is this worth it to me or not? Okay, it's worth it to me, I move over. And then as you continue on, before you get to the next segment, there will be another gantry well in advance, allowing you to make that conscious decision. Do I stay here or not? Well, if you turn to your right and you see that traffic is freed up, no, I'm good. You move back over into general purpose lanes and you make your meeting. If you want to continue forward, again, same thing. That's how it works. But something to bear in mind is that you may just as easily travel these lanes for free, day in and day out. HOV +3. We are proud to have that. If you have an NC Quick Pass, and if you don't have an NC Quick Pass, please get one. You declare HOV +3. If you have 3 people in the vehicle, you make this declaration through your transponder, you can travel for free. If you're a realtor taking a couple to go see a house on Lake Norman, declare HOV +3, you get there for free. If you're taking your kids to Davidson College, declare HOV +3. Going to Charlotte FC, the Charlotte Hornets, the Carolina Panthers, you can take your family for free. Also, of course, the lanes are available for free for transit vehicles, Charlotte area transit system vehicles, CATs, and of course, any emergency responder vehicles. These are express lanes for all. They're not just for a select few. And this exemplifies this. Our average monthly fee is $15. Our average user spends $15 a month on tolls. These lanes have been called Lexus lanes. Well, they're only for the rich. So, okay, so we wanted to take a look. We took a look at our top 200 users. What did we find? 76% drive non-luxury vehicles. Ford, Chevy, Dodge were the top brands of our top users. Not Lexus, not BMW, not Range Rover, Ford, Chevy, Dodge. These are lanes for everyone. High driver satisfaction. We do a survey every year with an international company. We ask a number of questions. One of the questions, of course, is, okay, if you take the lanes, what's your experience? Year in and year out, we're seeing 75% positive experience. People like it. Benefits for 300,000 distinct users use these tolls every month. It's not the same 10,000 people going 30 times a month. 300,000 distinct users. Now think about that. I talked about moving over and creating space. 300,000 users are moving over, and think about the space that is creating on the general purpose lanes. Mobility for millions, 1 million trips a month, and since we've begun in November of 2015, 3 million distinct vehicles we have seen on these express lanes. So in summary, the I-77 Express Corridor has experienced an increase in traffic volumes by more than 20% to pre-construction levels. However, congestion has decreased by 50%. That's something that was not in here. It's an industry term, TTI, Travel Time Index. And basically it measures how long a trip should take to how long it does actually take. 1.0 is the perfect. What we've seen is a better than 50% drop in TTI. Average day workday speeds, as I pointed out, greater than 15%. Again, on the free general purpose lanes, the accident rate has dropped by 90%. The express lanes provide an option for a reliable trip and give flexibility to all drivers. These lanes are made for everyone, not just a select few, and they're delivering benefits to everyone. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Chairman Nyland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, sir. I am not a regular user, but my son used to live in Mooresville off of exit 36, which is the northern terminus, I believe, of the lanes. And from where I live, it was over 4 hours from Brunswick County to Mooresville to visit. And I took these lanes. It was around 3.5 or maybe less. I took the Monroe bypass, the completed 485, I believe it is, around, and then the 77. I didn't get in it because I needed to. I got it because I want to see what it was like, and it was fantastic. So I want to thank you for the persistence. I'm a member of the controversy for the last dozen years about all this, and I appreciate the persistence and the willingness to pursue this, and I'm looking forward to it, applying hopefully to some of the projects down we just talked about this morning, because that's the way to go if we want to get it built in our lifetime. You know.
Chairman, I do appreciate that. And please, I will offer this out there. Anyone who would like to see it up close and take a look at our facility, we would absolutely welcome the opportunity to show off what our employees have accomplished there.
Representative Adams. Thank you very much for the presentation. I was on the Regional Roads Committee in Charlotte under Alan Tate years ago when we talked about this, and it's gratifying to see that it's worked out better than we really expected. And it was difficult to defend the idea when it was being decided. I remember the people in northern Iredell County who were so upset about it, but it has worked out quite well. And I think it showed us how things can be done with a little bit of imagination and tolerance. But anyway, thank you for the presentation. Really was good.
Thank you, Representative.
Chairman Sawyer.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. In the interest of time, I'll probably take some of these questions or answers offline, but I am one of those reluctant toll adopters from South Iredell. So I appreciate those who don't live there commenting, but I live in the belly of the beast. So question as we move forward, we understand that EVs are heavier than gas combustion engines. You guys recently allowed small delivery vehicles to use the tolling lanes, which I applaud. I wish we could use, trucks could use the toll lanes. But as we move forward in the electrification of those fleets, are you going to allow the heavier EVs to use those toll lanes?
That is a question that I do not have an answer to, but I can certainly put you in touch with smarter people than I who'll be able to answer that question for you.
I appreciate that. Just one quick follow-up then too. Again, talking about the controversy surrounding the projects and misinformation in the community. Explain to me what is a sealed bid process or unsolicited bid process. I think there's some confusion, especially in some of our CARPO members, about how that happens. You guys, so to get you off the hook, for me, I understand it as, hey, I see an opportunity. I'm a business person. I would like to take advantage of this opportunity, but you guys can't do anything other than this sealed bid process. Can you explain that in detail to kind of clear the air?
I would absolutely love to put you in touch with the people that can answer that, because there's a little bit of a firewall, maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding. I-77 Mobility Partners is not Centra. And if we're talking about the unsolicited proposal for the southern portion of I-77, that is Centra, not I-77 Mobility Partners. So I can't actually speak in any way with any authority on that. Two different entities, if you will. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Representative Logan.
How about your crash decreases by 90%? I just don't call them accidents because they're not. Is that pertaining to your roads, the toll roads, and not the general purpose lanes?
The entire corridor.
Because I-77 seems to, according to Highway Patrol, it increases in crashes. And mainly because I know they don't have the manpower.
Yeah.
I-77, for the use of the word, stays jacked up all the time, especially from 85 to Iredell County and Mecklenburg County.
Yeah.
It's constantly, as a matter of fact, they had a major crash yesterday, and they had a major crash coming out of Iredell last week, involved multiple vehicles. And I'm just saying that was just within the last week, but I'm sure I-77 is jacked up every day traveling.
Well, with respect, I would disagree with the characterization of jacked up. The data that we do have shows that in our research with the NCDOT, that the highway and the number of accidents has actually dramatically decreased. And I would be happy to review this with you and show you how we arrived at that, so that we're not just dealing with, as we might be here, with anecdotal evidence. But the number that we're showing, we've dropped dramatically from 196 to 103.
And I would love that.
Sure, absolutely.
Because, I'm not against that, but because I was one of the people that trained I-77 mobility. So I would love to have that conversation.
Sure.
Thank you.
No, and quite honestly, we would love to show you around and talk to you. I noticed from your earlier comment that you had some questions as regard state funding and whatnot, and we would absolutely love to show you how it's a success for North Carolinians in that region. And we hope North Carolina as a whole. So any opportunity you have, you're welcome. Well, come on over again. I'll buy you a coffee. How about that? Okay. Yeah, I don't know, Coke and something, I don't know. We'll change it up. Anybody else?
Well, we don't have any more questions, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Once again, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And we're going to adjourn the meeting now, but I want to thank all of you that have been present this year for our meetings and took part in our conversations and questions, and it's been very informative. Thank you to DOT. Thank you to our staff for putting all this together. And Have a great day.